Bob Dylan shocked the music world when he suddenly broke the decades-long silence about Richard Manuel, the fragile and mysterious soul of the band.
We drove ourselves to as near perfection as we could get, to the point where we'd really thrill each other.
His revelation was not a normal statement, but shocking information, overturning the way people once viewed Manuel and the relationship between the two. After many years, the secret behind Manuel's tragic death was revealed with never-before-published details. This is not only the story of a talented artist, but also the truth that has been buried for too long. The audience now stands before a completely different picture, more intense, more shocking than any previous speculation. In a brief statement recently excerpted in Stephen T. Lewis's biography, Richard Manuel, His Life and Music, Dylan admitted, "Richard had something that none of us had, and I couldn't defend it." This statement immediately stunned fans because for more than 3 decades, Dylan had never publicly said a word about Manuel's death. This is the first time Dylan has acknowledged his personal regret over the sudden death of the man with whom he co-wrote one of his most heartbreaking songs, Tears of Rage. While he has always maintained a separation between his work and his personal life, Dylan has crossed that line this time, and he has not done so lightly. Manuel was not only a distinctive singer, but also Dylan's polar opposite, vulnerable, emotional, and often consumed with internal anxiety. Dylan was calm, reserved, and in control. While they worked together, the two didn't always talk, but there was an unspoken understanding. There were long musical silences between us, Dylan notes, in a quote from a personal recording used in the new biography. Many have assumed their connection was tenuous, but Dylan actually chose Manuel to be the first person he wrote with during his Woodstock retreat. The Tears of Rage arrangement wasn't just a random track, but the start of a series of foundational recording sessions for the Basement Tapes, where the band began to form its own musical identity. Manuel played piano, provided lead vocals, and wrote lyrics with Dylan, a rarity given Dylan rarely shared songwriting credit at the time. But being a musical ally during Manuel's most creative period, Dylan largely disappeared after learning of Manuel's death. He did not appear at the funeral, did not issue a statement, and did not send public condolences. Manuel's close friend, Garth Hudson, once said that Dylan chose to bury his grief in his own way. But now, with the appearance of his own admission, the public has a partial explanation for that silence. In his 2025 biography, Lewis claims Dylan wrote a short letter to Manuel's family a few weeks after the event, which was kept secret for years. In it, Dylan writes, "I kept quiet for too long. There were things I thought I would tell him, but I never did." This document was authenticated by Lewis's collection of sources from Manuel's family and those closest to him. Dylan's few performances after 1986 have seen him reprise songs associated with Manuel, such as I Shall Be Released, but he has never commented on why he keeps them in his repertoire. Ultimately, his breaking of silence this time comes not from a need for publicity, but as a way of clearing up things that have never been said. It's not a promotional or image-building move, but a rare expression from someone who has always kept his emotions at arm's length. To understand why Dylan was so tormented, it is necessary to trace the internal conflicts and turning points in the final phase of the band, where Manuel was gradually pushed out of the main orbit of the group. Fault lines within the band. Richard Manuel was once the emotional center of the band, but over time that position was gradually pushed aside by irreversible changes within the group. The split began when Robbie Robertson took over much of the writing and production, leaving the other members, especially Manuel, in a more obscured position. Manuel's lack of writing involvement led to a feeling of being left out, but being the one who laid the foundation for the band's early style. Many documents show that after the success of the albums, music from Big Pink and the band Creative Power began to tilt towards Robertson. Manuel did not react harshly, but gradually withdrew. In the following recording sessions, the number of songs composed by Manuel decreased significantly. He still contributed vocals and played instruments as before, but his influence on the direction of the group was no longer as it was at the beginning. Meanwhile, Robertson continued to assert his role as the group's leader clearly. Along with the musical power divide, the way the group operated also created a growing divide. Manuel, along with Rick Danko and Garth Hudson, still favored improvisation and teamwork, while Robertson pursued a high level of professionalism and control over everything, from the songs to the image. Levon Helm later wrote that everything in the band gradually became one man in charge, and the rest just followed. One of the most glaring examples of this imbalance was the 1976 performance of The Last Waltz, an event that was famously filmed and released as a documentary. Although an original member, Richard Manuel, did not get to sing a single solo song during the night. Instead, the focus was on Robertson and the guests. Manuel's absence from the main set was not accidental, but the result of management and production decisions, leading many to believe that he had been relegated to a supporting role in the band he had originally helped build. Dylan's relationship with the band during this period was also influential. While Dylan kept his distance, Robertson became the main conduit, taking the lead in all collaborations between the two. This added to the feeling of marginalization felt by Manuel, who had been Dylan's co-writer in the early days, but now had little say in any joint projects. When Dylan rejoined the band in 1974, Manuel was a performer, with no involvement in songwriting or shaping the material. The tension extended beyond his career to his personal life. While Robertson was often praised by the press and critics, Manuel's efforts and quiet contributions were rarely mentioned. This contributed to his withdrawal, his lack of motivation and confidence in his place in the group. Other members, such as Helm and Danko, still had feelings for Manuel, but they were not enough to change the balance that had been so far off balance. Although the tension did not erupt into public conflict, it continued until the band's breakup. The decision to end the band came from Robertson and was made in a context where many of the other members disagreed. Manuel did not react strongly, but those close to him confirmed that he felt completely abandoned. As his role in the group fell apart, Manuel's personal life began to unravel. The simmering conflicts within the band turned into psychological wounds, paving the way for a long-term breakdown and an uncontrolled lifestyle, which would become evident in the next phase. Addiction and isolation. Richard Manuel began using heroin late in the band's career. Initially, it didn't interfere with his music, but as time went on, his condition worsened. By the early 1970s, Manuel had become a heavy drinker. Those who worked closely with him say he drank heavily for long periods of time and was rarely sober when he entered the studio. Manuel's dependence on stimulants caused a significant decline in his ability to compose and perform. He was often late to recording sessions and at times was unable to complete his playing or singing due to his health condition. Producers and engineers had to constantly adjust their schedules to accommodate his erratic state. But this, the other members of the band continued to support and shelter Manuel, especially Rick Danko and Garth Hudson. Nonetheless, this support could only last for a certain period of time. The pressure of being pushed out of the band combined with his long-term addiction took a toll on Manuel's mental health. He attempted suicide twice. The first time was when he doused himself in gasoline and set himself on fire in his own home. The second time was when he shot himself in the head with an air gun. Manuel survived both times, but his mental state was said to be very unstable afterward. While living in California, Manuel rented a house that had once belonged to actress Goldie Hawn. There he lived in relative isolation and barely communicated with anyone other than his bandmates. Witnesses said the house was always silent, the curtains were always drawn, and the phone was often unplugged. Visitors said Manuel often fell into a state of melancholy, sitting for hours at his guitar without playing a tune. Eric Clapton, who had a close relationship with Manuel, visited him several times during this period. Both were struggling with addiction and feeling left behind in the music industry. Clapton once said, "Richard is the most sensitive person I have ever met. That vulnerability is what makes him special." This quote, recorded in the appendix of Manuel's 2025 biography, shows the extent of the connection between the two artists who collaborated at Shangri-La. Manuel had a brief period of sobriety when the band reunited in 1983, joining small tours with Rick Danko, Levon Helm, and Garth Hudson. During this time, Manuel's health improved. He began eating regularly, performing regularly, and occasionally writing again. Nonetheless, his recovery was short-lived. After the sudden death of Albert Grossman, who had been an important manager and patron of his career, Manuel spiraled back into uncontrollable rage. Grossman was the only person in the music industry whom Manuel truly trusted, and his loss is said to have been the final blow that completely destroyed his spirit. Manuel's drinking became worse. While he still got on stage on time and finished his set, he often had to rely on his bandmates to keep him on track. At times, he drank so much that he couldn't leave his dressing room after a show. The other band members became increasingly frustrated. They tried to encourage him to quit, but their efforts had no lasting effect. As his personal life spiraled downward, his health and mental state deteriorated. The final steps toward tragedy took shape. It all came to a head on one final night in Florida, where things became irreversible. The final hours. On March 3, 1986, the band played 2 sets at the Cheek to Cheek Lounge, a small venue in Winter Park, Florida. It was one of several stops in a series of small shows the band performed after reuniting without Robbie Robertson. Richard Manuel performed energetically that night. He played piano and sang as usual, especially during his rendition of "I Shall Be Released," a song he had made famous during his early days with Bob Dylan. After the show, he stayed backstage to chat with Levon Helm, Rick Danko, and a few friends. No one noticed anything unusual. Between 2:30 and 3:30 a.m., after returning to his room at the Quality Inn, Richard Manuel hanged himself in the bathroom with a belt. His wife Arlie discovered his body around noon the next day. The autopsy report revealed a high concentration of alcohol and traces of cocaine in his system. Although he did not leave a suicide note, his previous mental state and his actions in the final moments of his life suggested that this was a deliberate decision. Police concluded that this was a suicide with no signs of external influence. Arlie Manuel testified that there was no argument between the two that night. On the contrary, Manuel appeared cheerful after the show, and even chatted for a while before she went to bed. People present at the venue also confirmed that Manuel seemed to be in a stable mood. He signed autographs for some fans, and even joked with the sound technicians before leaving backstage. This shocked many close to him, as no one expected that a few hours later he would leave in such a way. Rick Danko later said he had no idea why this happened. In a 1987 interview, Danko said, "I didn't get any signals." Richard was planning to record some new demos in the next few weeks. To me, it was more of a silly accident than a planned thing. Nonetheless, others in the band claimed that Manuel had been acting less normal in the days leading up to it, like being quieter than usual, and looking off into the distance when no one was looking. Following his death, the band canceled all remaining concerts for the year. The funeral was held in Woodstock, New York. Rick Danko played the organ and sang "I Shall Be Released at the Church," which was attended by many close artists, such as Van Morrison, Eric Clapton, Garth Hudson, and Levon Helm. Robbie Robertson did not attend, but sent a wreath and a private message of condolence to the family. Bob Dylan did not attend the funeral and did not make any public statement at the time. Manuel's death made brief appearances in major music publications, but not for long. A few rock sites published tributes focusing on his early career with the band. There was no official statement from Dylan or his representatives afterward, but the fact that their relationship had been a topic of interest in music circles. Dylan was touring in Europe at the time and continued his schedule as usual. For the rest of the band, Manuel's death left a void that could never be filled. Garth Hudson barely spoke to the press after the event, while Levon Helm simply said, "It knocked everything down." Manuel's passing also ended any hope of the group returning to its former glory. In later years, documents, recordings, and accounts from close friends reveal a remarkable musical legacy. These contributions have not been forgotten, but are increasingly being rediscovered with greater respect, something that will be explored in more depth in the next section. The weight of Richard Manuel. Richard Manuel is not the most talked about person when talking about the band, but what he left behind has quietly made an impact for decades. His distinctive falsetto voice, a blend of pain and hope, is the element that makes many songs different. His singing parts in Whispering Pines, In a Station, or Lonesome Susie are still considered emotional highlights in the entire musical legacy of the group. Not only stopping at the performance, Manuel also contributed to shaping the original color of the band when the group still had a natural rustic style before entering the stages of greater change. Manuel's songwriting career, though short, was significant. The song "Tears of Rage," which he wrote with Bob Dylan during the Big Pink recordings, is one of the clearest examples of his ability to combine emotion and depth of content. It was not a big commercial hit, but it was highly appreciated by critics and longtime music lovers. The way Manuel wrote the lyrics and played the piano on this song created a rare combination of spirit of resistance and quiet pain, something that few people have been able to replicate since. The 2025 biography, Richard Manuel. His life and music sheds more light on Manuel's true role in the band. Based on more than 40 interviews and previously unreleased recordings, the book offers a more complete look at the creative process, the unfinished tracks, and the moment Manuel almost withdrew from the band altogether. Eric Clapton, who worked with the band at Shangri-La Studios, said Richard didn't have to prove anything. He would just play a few notes, and you would feel something happening inside you. This sentiment is echoed in numerous interviews with artists who had the opportunity to work with Manuel. Another notable detail mentioned in the biography is the presence of several unreleased recordings from the early 1980s. These are demos that Manuel recorded alone without the participation of the other members. Some of these tracks are close to gospel and blues in style, clearly showing the influence of Ray Charles, his biggest musical idol. Although not officially released, these recordings are currently in storage and are expected to be post-processed for release in the future. In addition to his musical influence, Richard Manuel was also of spiritual importance to those in the band. Levon Helm once remarked that without Manuel, the band would never have felt like a real family. This reflected the role he played in the group. Not the decision-maker, not the leader, but the invisible glue that held the members together. Manuel's influence has also extended to generations of artists who have followed him. Singers who pursue Americana or folk rock styles often cite him as a symbol of musical sincerity. Counting Crows' 2002 song, "If I Could Give All My Love." Richard Manuel is Dead is a prime example. Although not as widely popularized in popular culture as the other members of the band, Manuel is still seen as a role model for artists who prioritize emotion and depth over fame or commercial success. In recent Bob Dylan performances, many have noticed that he has often played "I Shall Be Released" and other songs associated with Manuel. While Dylan has not explicitly called this a tribute, the frequency of the repetition and the way he performs these songs has led many to assume that this is a silent homage. Additionally, in a section of the document used in the 2025 biography, there is a handwritten note believed to be written by Dylan, which reads, "He didn't just sing. He carried the weight we couldn't." Although not long, the sentence sums up exactly what Richard Manuel represented in the group. The story of Richard Manuel and what Bob Dylan finally shared not only reminds us of the forgotten talent, but also shows that behind the halo are real people with real wounds. If you feel that what you just heard touches something in you, leave a comment below. What do you think about their relationship, about how things happened? Don't forget to like. If you find this video worthy, share it with those who love music as much as you do, and subscribe to the channel, so you don't miss other profound stories from the world of artists. Thank you for your time.